I still have some summer yarn in my stash that I would like to use up, so I've been browsing Ravelry trying to find projects that are suitable for late summer, for early fall, and for layering. Just something that I can start right now and I don't have to feel super stressed about getting it done quickly because I can still wear it into the next season. I've divided what I found into 4 categories. So firstly, we have some light and airy stockinette pieces, just something with a thin fabric that you can easily throw in a bag and keep around in case it gets a bit colder in the evenings. Then I have some lace pieces that have a more open fabric by nature that you can use for layering. I have some cardigans that are easy to throw on over an existing outfit. And lastly, I brought some shawls and ponchos for some added warmth around your shoulders. So let's look at what I found. For the stockinette category, I have a few full-length sleeve options that I'm going to do first, and then I have some short sleeve options for after. And the first piece that I brought is already a bit of a classic to me. It is called the Aura Top by Alice Hoyle, and I've somehow seen everybody I follow online make one of these. And it is just a very basic stockinette sweater that is knitted with a lace weight mohair at an open gauge. I've seen a lot of people make one in bright colors. You can easily throw this on over any top in your wardrobe. And I think it looks very flattering and very cool. The only thing that's been deterring me from knitting one of these is that it is knitted bottom up, and I'm not quite sure why that was necessary. It's not the most fun option, I think, but regardless, I think it's a great piece, especially if you knit a lot with like merino held with mohair and you maybe have some leftover mohair from sweaters. This would be a great way to use them up because you don't really need a lot of yarn for it. And then my second option is kind of similar. It is also a see-through basic sweater with a lace with mohair knitted at an open gauge. It is called Summer Night Sweater by Cornelia St. Cornelia Street. I don't know. I listen to too much Taylor Swift apparently. This one is worked top down, which I enjoy, and it also has stripes. So in case you have like different colors of mohair you might want to use up, this would be a good option. It is also a free pattern, so that's pretty cool. You can just peek into it if you're curious about how a garment like this might work. Moving on, we're kind of staying on the see-through theme. This is the Owlery blouse by Fable Knitwear, and it is a bit of a more elevated version of what we've just been looking at, I would say. It's very elegant looking. It is called a blouse. It is a raglan construction. You also knit it bottom up, and it has these parts up top here that I believe are just worked with a strand of mohair that I see through, and then for the most part of the body, I believe you're holding a wool and a mohair together to create this opaque look. So you have some parts of the sweater that are a bit airier and thinner, and some parts that are like actually covering you up. So in case you're looking for something that is a bit more practical to style, where you don't always have to worry about what you're wearing underneath, this would be a good option. Also, the next one that I brought, I would say this is the most sweater-like of all of the stockinette options. And it's moving a little bit into the lace direction already. I've brought 2 patterns that combine this light airy stockinette look with a tiny bit of lace at least. This has some eyelets. This one is called the Roni Sweater by 𝗙𝗡𝗡 by Johanna. It is a top-down worsted weight raglan sweater, and it recommends a merino held with a mohair, so it is maybe a bit warm already. I still feel like it has this lightweight look, but you can probably wear this into fall in most places. So it is a bit of a warmer choice, but it still feels very summery to me. And then lastly, for the long sleeves, I brought something. I'm not sure if this is a sweater technically. It is called Skyline by 𝗙𝗛𝗡𝗗𝗏. It is a drop shoulder garment. It is knitted bottom up with a worsted weighted linen yarn, and it's just super wide and flowy. You get a lot of options for the sleeves as far as I understand. So there's some long sleeve options, there's some like 3/4 sleeve options, there's short sleeve options, and you get different yarn amounts for all of them. So if you want to modify this to be a short sleeve version, you don't have to overbuy on yarn. I think these diagonal eyelet lines are very flattering and flowy, and I think they look engaging to knit as well. It seems like you always have something to look forward to while you're working on this, which is something I really enjoy for a process knit. I also brought some short sleeve options that have this light airy flowy stockinette look, and the first one is called Sunset Raglan Tee by 𝗙𝗛𝗡𝗏. It is a top-down bulky weight raglan shirt, and I would say this isn't as thin as the other options, but it's still very light and open, and I think a lot of that comes down to the yarn choice here. It recommends a cotton and linen mix. And what I really enjoy about this is that I feel like it makes the properties of the yarn the star of the shirt instead of them being a drawback. I oftentimes find that when I knit stockinette in summer yarns that just aren't very stretchy, that it looks a bit messy because the stitches are just uneven by nature. Like even if you have good tension, if the yarn doesn't really move with you, I guess, the stitches will just look slightly different. And I feel like if you're going for a more polished stockinette look, it oftentimes doesn't look that great, but this pattern is kind of making this a feature. I think it is in part this very specific yarn that they are recommending that is getting them this texture, but I still believe you can make this out of any summer yarn and get like an effortless, cool looking t-shirt. And then I have something on the complete other side of the spectrum. This is very polished looking. It's kind of the same concept as the owlery blouse I showed earlier. It is half see-through but still full coverage. It is called the Eloise top by Friday Knits, and it is knitted with a sport weight merino held with a mohair, I believe, for the opaque parts, and then for the see-through parts it's just the mohair. It is a drop shoulder t-shirt, and it has these popcorn stitch details up here for the upper part of the shirt. And I actually think if you take a step back, it almost looks a bit like polka dots, which is really fun, and I think they've been quite trendy for the last few months, so maybe a cool project for the summer. It also has some ribbing in the back, which I really enjoy because it means that you can get like the actual tight fit that is shown in the sample very easily, and overall I think this is a really cool and creative looking project. As is the next one, this is called the Soft Mohair Vest by 𝗙𝗛𝗡𝗏, and I find this practical because it seems like something that you can wear year round. It is a see-through vest that is knitted bottom up out of a lace weight yarn, and I feel like this could be great as a summer layering piece in case you have a top that you want to wear this over, but it could also easily be worn in the fall, like in the sample picture here, over a button down or even over sweaters in colder weather. And I really enjoy this because you can still see everything that you're wearing underneath, so it's like you're adding something to your outfit instead of covering it up with a vest. I think that's a really cool concept, and that is also true for the next shirt that I brought. It is called shawls by Hitch by Stitch. It is knitted top down with a lace weight mohair. It has a circular yoke construction, which is something that I feel like a lot of people don't enjoy, but I really like them. I think they're really fun to knit, and they can also look really flattering. I feel like they always give a bit of a flowy look, so for late summer layering, I feel like that's cool to go for something like that. The t-shirt also has like very subtle bow details. I'm not quite sure how they are made. I think the notes didn't really say how that was achieved, but it looks very cool. And I really enjoyed this outfit that she's wearing in the sample picture. Like, I never thought to make see-through knitwear and then layer it over a graphic t-shirt, so I'm just feeling very inspired from a style perspective as well. And then lastly, for the stockinette category, I brought another even more sheer t-shirt. It is called the 𝗙𝗛𝗡𝗏 by 𝗙𝗛𝗡𝗏, and it has nothing to do with the 𝗙𝗛𝗡 top that I showed earlier, despite it having essentially the same concept and the same name, but it's a totally different designer, which I thought was kind of funny. It is knitted top down with raglan increases, and you're holding a DK weight cotton with a paillette yarn. I think this would be really fun for summer special occasions. At least that's something I always struggle to get dressed for, because I feel like there's very little overlap between clothes that look festive and clothes that aren't super warm. So I feel like this would be a great option if you're invited somewhere fancy. And then we can move on to my lace category. I tried to go from most opaque to most transparent for this one. I'm not sure how sensible that order is, but I guess you could also call it going from the warmest to the coolest option. And the first one that I brought is called Blouse Number 2 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. It is a drop-down top shoulder sweater knitted from a DK weight cotton yarn, and I was really happy to see this one. I think I found it a few months ago already when I was looking at Summer Knits Fast, and I already put it on my list to maybe make it someday there, because I rarely see sweaters designed for a cotton yarn. I guess you could probably make most sweaters that are designed for a merino or a wool out of cotton as well, but cotton is just a bit different. It's not fluffy, it's not stretchy, it's heavier, so it's just cool to know that there's some patterns where it's in from the get-go and it will definitely work out. Where I live, I could probably wear this year round. It seems very engaging to knit because it has these like stripes kind of. The lace is very easy, so you don't have to be very close to the pattern, I assume, and it also has garter stitch. So I'm assuming even the parts that you're knitting flat, you won't have to do too much purling. And then the next one that I found is called 𝗣𝗚𝗧𝗧𝗘𝗥𝗡𝗦 Sweater by Lynette. It has this very pretty diamond-shaped lace pattern repeat, and it recommends a wool or alpaca yarn held with a mohair, so maybe a bit on the warmer side, despite it still having this open lace texture. I find the sizing on this very interesting. It only comes in 3 sizes, so it's not super size inclusive, but the sizes are achieved by using a different gauge. So depending on how many strands of yarn and what yarn weights you hold together, you're getting a different bust circumference. I've never really come across a pattern like this. I think the design is very cool. I'm not really sure how the sizes work out, so if you've ever made this or any pattern like it where the different sizes were achieved by knitting the same thing with a different gauge, I'd be really curious to hear about your experience with that and how that was working for you, because it seems like an interesting concept to me. Next, I found this very cool looking sweater. It reminds me a bit of stained glass windows. It is called Blouse 4 by Tina Husing, and it is knitted top down with a drop shoulder, and the recommended yarn is either a wool or a linen held with a mohair. So I guess if you want to make a summer version, you can just go for the linen and then have something that is not super warm but still like a little bit fluffy and nice looking. One thing I'm not quite sure about here is the colors. I think it's very cool how all of the little lace repeats are different colors, but Maybe if you have a lot of fingering weight leftovers to use for this, that would be cool, but I don't think if I was buying yarn specifically to make this, I would get all these different colors, because you just end up using a very tiny amount of all of them. I think it says that the sample has 18 different colors, so maybe if you can find a yarn that offers these 10-gram mini skeins, it would make sense to go for a very colorful version, but even then I feel like 18 colors is a lot. It does look very cool though, but I still think this would look fun if you just chose like 1 or 2 contrast colors to go with it. And then for this next one, you only need one color. It is called Fleurette by Caroline Maria Beaufort. It has these fan-shaped lace repeats all over it, and I think that would probably make it relatively quick to knit, because I feel like you're losing most time on knitting lace when the lace is complicated and you need to always look at the pattern, always have the pattern next to you. It also makes the project not be very portable. So I think something that has just a tiny, easy repeat that you just knit a bunch of times over and over again would probably make a relatively quick project, despite it being fingering weight. It recommends a merino yarn held with a mohair, and my favorite detail about this is the little wavy edges that follow these fan lines. It just gives it a nice organic shape, and actually the next sweater that I brought has these wavy edges as well. It is called the Madeleine sweater by Pernille Larsen. And this is something I've made before actually, and has been partly the inspiration behind this video, because it is still one of my all-time favorite, most worn pieces, despite me being kind of unsure whether I'd find this usable when I made it. It is knitted with a worsted weight wool by Knitting for Olive, because it is a Knitting for Olive pattern, but I used a drop spell for this, so I made it out of a more summery fiber, which I think was a really good choice, because I feel like if I made this out of a wool and it had that much lace, I wouldn't really wear it in warmer weather because the wool would be too warm, but then I also wouldn't really wear it in colder weather because the lace would be too open. So I think that was a really good compromise for me, and despite it being quite heavy, it has held up well so far. So I would recommend. It has this house-shaped pattern repeat all over. I would say it's like medium difficult. You do have to have the pattern open next to you when you're moving on to a new round, but because the pattern repeat itself isn't very wide and it's also symmetrical, I was able to just look at the pattern once and then remember what I was supposed to do for the next round, so it was okay. I do admit that the process of making this dragged on for me a little bit. It wasn't the most fun process knit because it is knitted bottom up entirely. You start working the body from the bottom in the round, and then you're working the front piece and the back piece flat, so you do have to do the lace on the wrong side as well. If I remember correctly, I believe the more complicated stitches were all done on the right side, but still there were some things you had to pay attention to when you're doing the wrong side of your work. And then the sleeves are knitted in the round, but they're also done bottom up, so you start at the cuff and then you work them upwards and later attach them with Kitchener stitch here. So I would say it takes you a while and it's not super fun. You can't really try it on at all while you're knitting it. So that was something I didn't quite enjoy. It does make sense with the pattern repeat. You couldn't really knit it any other way. But I would say despite this taking a while to get through, I am so happy with the finished object that it would absolutely be worth it. And I would even knit another one if this one like at some point stretched out too much or something like that. I really enjoy this pattern a lot. And then next I brought a very new release. This is called the Daydreamer Tee by Sari Nordland. I think this was released this month or like very recently, like this week sometime. It is a drop-down top shoulder t-shirt with a worsted weight cotton rayon linen mix. And I have to say I don't really enjoy the mud color of the sample. I was kind of not sure if I liked this when I looked at it fast, but when I look at the projects, I think it looks a lot cooler in other colors, but obviously that's just my personal preference. The reason why I decided to include this still is that it looks so fun to knit because it has lace, it has cables, but nothing that is like overly complicated. The cables are very small, the lace is relatively small, so it just looks like a very enjoyable process knit, and it also looks like you get a very usable result that is still really easy to style, and obviously you can pick the color yourself, so you can just go for something that you enjoy. I brought another t-shirt that has kind of a similar fit. It is called the Grace Blouse by Tante Grön. It seems a bit simpler even because the lace repeat is smaller and it is worked top down, but I'm not quite sure how exactly it is constructed because the tags say set and sleeve, but from how the construction is described and also from what it looks like in the picture, it seems more like a drop shoulder to me. I don't know, it recommends a DK weight cotton held with a mohair, and I would say we've definitely arrived at the more see-through knits now. The next one I brought is more sheer, I guess. It has more of a thin fabric rather than open lace. It is called La Tulipe Sweater by Mere Knits. It is a top-down circular yoke made with a lace weight mohair held double, which I actually think is really fun because it kind of hides the lace a bit. So the lace is like there and it looks cool, but it isn't really the star of the show. I think that's very interesting because I guess usually when you're knitting lace or cables or any kind of texture, you're trying to go for yarn that maybe isn't as fluffy, so you can really see that texture shine. And it's an interesting concept to me to kind of hide that in the fluff. But there are also some pictures where there's a swatch knitted from a more opaque yarn, I guess. So you could make like a thicker version of this if you just enjoy the design but want to actually be able to see the lace. And then the next one I brought has a similar situation where there's one sample that is a bit more see-through and one sample that is a bit more solid looking. This is called the Fern Sweater by Irene Lin, and it features this, I guess, heart-shaped pattern repeat all over. It is a very oversized sweater made from a fingering weight cashmere. But there's also a sample done in merino, which is this like blue sample. I think both of them look really cool. I guess the blue one is more like what the Madeline sweater looks like a little bit, and the cashmere sample is a little more like flowy and airy looking. It is worked top down with raglan increases, and it just seems fun to make with this simple lace repeat and still this very flattering result. And then lastly, for the lace category, I brought the Partition Pullover by James N. Watts. This is, I guess, a mesh option. This is like truly completely see-through. It is a top-down drop shoulder sweater made from a cotton bamboo mix, and I've really enjoyed scrolling through the projects on this one because you can see how people really customized this. Some people made a very tight-fitting version, some people made it like very boxy and oversized, and both look really, really cool. And for my next section, I brought some like summer cardigan and vest options for layering. The first one is called Layer Me in Stripes Cardigan by Johanna Reuss. It is a striped raglan knit done from a worsted weight cotton rayon linen yarn. And I think the colorful stripes are very summery still. I also like that it uses a summery yarn, so this seems perfect to me for days where it is just a tiny bit cold or maybe a bit windy or the sun is going down and you can just have this with you and throw it on. And then similarly, I brought another like thinner cardigan. This is called the Sorel Cardigan by Ingrid Dipp. It uses a merino held with a silk to create this very clean looking DK weight cardigan. I also enjoy how there isn't really a button band. That makes it easier and quicker to knit, obviously, but also I feel like that is what gives it this summery look. The fact that you get like a little bit of gaping between the buttons and it's more effortless because it doesn't have these like polished finishings. I think it suits the warmer weather style really well. And then I brought one more cardigan option that is maybe a bit warmer than the other ones. It is called the Maria cardigan, and this has truly been everywhere. It is designed by Maria 𝗙𝗛𝗡𝗏. It is more of a classic cardigan option, I guess. It is also made with a merino held with a mohair, so just generally a bit warmer. You could probably wear this in fall as well. But I still feel like this vertically striped lace looks very summery. Maybe also because all of the Maria series, I think she has like blouses and sweaters and t-shirts from this, and they're all made in like a very pastel-y, girly color. So maybe that's just what gives it a more summery feel to me. But I've also really enjoyed looking at the project page here. There's a lot of people making this cardigan in like very different colors, very bright colors or dark colors even, which has a totally different vibe. It also looks really, really cool. And then I brought two like vest patterns. The first one is called the Honey Vest by Knitters and Friends. It is knitted top down with a worsted weight merino, and it has this very simple and clean design with a little bit of ribbing for the finishings and then a double knit button band. And I think this is just very versatile for styling. Like you can wear this as in the sample picture over a t-shirt in the summer, or you could even just close it and wear it as a normal vest in the winter, like over a button down. The second vest that I brought has a similar clean vibe and similar styling options, I would say. It is called the Sophia Vest by Lirio Knits, and it is knitted with a DK weight merino, but this one features a zipper instead of a button band, which I also really enjoy. I think this looks almost store-bought, like these Finance Bro jackets a little bit. You have to make it out of a dark blue for that, of course, but the red is also stunning. I also enjoy the really big turtleneck, and I'm not quite sure how the zipper is attached, so you might have to sew that on. But it doesn't say, so I'm not sure how much sewing is involved in this one. The next cardigan has a very fun construction. It is called Seelenwärmerkasper by Safri Design, and it seems more like a wearable blanket to me than like a cardigan. I'm just imagining putting this on to have a cup of tea by the fire. That's like the scenario that I see this cardigan in. It is knitted with a DK weight merino, and I believe you work the back piece first. You work that bottom up, and then you pick up stitches for the sleeves. And then you knit those, and then you pick up stitches from there for the front pieces, as far as I understand. It looks very interesting. I also enjoy how you get a few different options for this in the same pattern. So there's one solid color option, there's one with colorful details, and then one that is a bit longer with pockets, but you only have to pay for one pattern still and get all of the choices. And then I found two like lighter lacy cardigans that have a very different vibe from this one. The first one is called Pierre Cardigan by Colibri by Johanna. It is made from a fingering weight merino held with a mohair using a European shoulder construction, and you also get the choice to either make an O-neck or a V-neck in the same pattern, which I always think is very nice. I just think it looks entertaining to make like a project you might have on the side for a couple of weeks. Always get to do like a little bit of this intricate intricate lace and just have a very cool looking finished result. And then I also brought a short sleeve option. This is called the Bonbon Cardi by Mere Knits. It has a like simple small lace repeat and this wavy button band that I think looks quite cool. It is also done with a European shoulder construction from a sport weight cotton yarn. And I think you have a lot more styling options with this. Actually, you could just wear it as a t-shirt and close it in the summer, or then if it gets a little bit colder, you can always wear it open and lay a top underneath. So that just seems quite fun. I've also seen in the project section that a lot of people adapted this to make a long sleeve version in case you're not a fan of the short sleeves. So the pattern seems very customizable. And then lastly, I have two bolero style cardigans that are just very cropped in case you're wanting something to layer over a dress, or you really just need some sleeves for a bit of extra warmth. The first one is called Sophia Shrug by Alison Rose. It is a drop shoulder construction knitted from a fingering weight stock yarn, and it has these flared sleeves and some ribbed finishings and then an I-cord tie in the front to close it. And I wouldn't really say this needs more yarn than a top, so if you have just a few skeins, this would also be a cool project. And then the second one is called Wendy Bolero by 𝗙𝗛𝗡𝗏. It is knitted sideways, which I think is very interesting, from a sport weight cotton. It also closes with an I-cord, just very similar concept, but it's, or at least the sample that is shown first is more sheer. So it's made from a thinner yarn, I guess. And then there's also some more opaque versions made from a thicker yarn. I just think it's really cool how the cables are going sideways. That's not something that I see a ton. And then for my last category, I have a few pieces that didn't really go with anything else. They're more like something to throw over your shoulders, I guess. The first one is called a bolero, but I feel like it's different from the other ones I showed in that it is not really a cardigan. It is more like a sweater without a body. It is called Long Sleeve Retro Bolero by Handmade by Fasola, and it is made from a sport weight alpaca held with a mohair. There seems to be some crochet portion, and I'm not sure how large it is because it doesn't really say. Oftentimes for knitting patterns, it'll just be the button closures, but to me it seems like some of the finishings along the like underside of the bolero are also crochet. So maybe don't start on this unless you feel relatively confident in like some basic crochet stitches. I don't know. It seems to be worked with raglan increases, and I really enjoy the way that she styled it here with this like very high neck and this O shape that this bolero ends in, but then like a very low cut top underneath. I think that looks very cool. And then I brought two shawls, I guess, that you can drape over yourself in case it is a bit chilly. The first one is called 𝗙𝗛𝗡𝗏 Wedding Shawl by 𝗙𝗛𝗡𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏𝗏 straight silk mohair, and it is a sheer shawl with this lace pattern repeat all over. It seems to be rectangular from what I can tell, and I brought a circle shaped option as well. This one is called 𝗙𝗛𝗧𝗧𝗘𝗥𝗡𝗦 shawl by Susan Pandolf, and I've been kind of obsessed with this pattern ever since I saw somebody on TikTok make this for their wedding with like a hand spun yarn out of like a very, very thin thread. It looked so cool. It's such a beautiful project as well. There's so many projects already, so you can get like infinite inspiration from the project page. I think this is something I want to make this at some point. I don't know if it'll happen this year or at any other point in the future. It just seems like a cool long-term project to have going on the side where you can always do a few rows. It also seems like very engaging to knit because there's always something different going on, and I would just be curious about making a circle like that. I assume you would like start in the middle with just a few stitches and then extend outwards, kind of like a circular yoke sweater, except there's not like a hole for your head in the middle. But I've never like seen a construction like that. It also doesn't give me a ton of information about how it's done, but I think this is a very amazing project. I will say it states that it is somehow inspired by Lord of the Rings, and I don't know anything about Lord of the Rings, but I'm just going to choose to assume that I can still make this and wear this not as Lord of the Rings merch. I just think it has so many options for what to do with it. Like even if you're not wearing it as a shawl, I think this would make a great like tablecloth as well. Or there's like one picture where it's just draped over a bench, or you could like drape it over an armchair or a couch, and it looks so cool. I want one. And then for the end, I have two poncho patterns. The first one is called 𝗙𝗛𝗧𝗧𝗘𝗥𝗦 by 𝗙𝗛𝗧𝗧𝗘𝗥𝗦, made from a silk mohair held with a glittery thread, which is really cool. I like a glittery thread. It is worked as a rectangle and then like attached to itself somehow. And I really enjoy these like whimsical pearls that it has hanging from it. It almost looks like something a mythical fantasy forest creature would wear. And then the second one is called 𝗙𝗛𝗧𝗧𝗘𝗥𝗦 by Insoluble Fiber Arts. It is made from, I guess, either a crochet thread held with a glittery thread or just the glittery thread held double. And it is a sheer poncho with long tassels, and it looks really, really fun. It would also be cool for special occasions, I think, but I also enjoy the way that she styled it here as a swimsuit cover-up. So that was all of the patterns for today. If you have any more like summer favorites you would like to share in the comments, I would love to hear about them. I'd also love to hear about your experience knitting any of these patterns if you have made them. and I hope you found some inspiration for your late summer knitting, and I'll see you next time.